Have you heard that too much protein can cause kidney damage? Or protein shakes are required for muscle building only? Or even your body can only absorb a certain amount of protein in one go? My name is Elle, I'm a registered sports dietitian, and we're going to debunk a few of the popular protein myths in this video. In the past decade, protein has been highlighted as the star nutrient that can do no wrong, and almost every food company has brought out a high protein version of their popular products to please the population. However, more protein does not mean more gains. Unlike fats and carbs, we cannot store protein in the body, which means that we must consume a sufficient amount of protein each day. The recommended protein intake for adults is 0.75 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight. However, exercise increases the rate of muscle protein breakdown, which is why for those who are active, the requirement of protein increases to between 1.2 to 1.8 grams per kilogram of body weight, depending on the type of activity that they engage in. For example, strength athletes will likely need more protein than endurance athletes. When more protein is consumed than required, deamination occurs. This is the process where the amino acid group is separated from the carboxyl group. The amino acid group is excreted as the body cannot store these, but the carboxyl group can be used for energy. The International Society of Sports Nutrition outlines that a range of 1.4 to 2 grams of protein per kilogram of body weight is sufficient for most individuals who exercise and want to build muscle mass or maintain it. There is some research that suggests that higher protein intakes above 2 grams may be beneficial in the context of weight loss, in that they can support the maintenance of muscle mass and loss of fat mass. Research has shown that 1.8 to 3.7 grams per kilogram per day with a calorie deficit can help to prevent lean muscle mass losses. However, consuming more protein than you need doesn't offer an advantage in terms of health or physical performance. Excess protein will be used for energy, just like the case with consuming more of any other nutrient. In a study, strength athletes were assigned to either a low protein diet providing around 0.86 grams per kilogram of body weight per day, a moderate protein diet providing 1.4, and a high protein diet providing 2.3 grams. The low protein diet, which is close to the recommendations for those who are sedentary, led to muscle mass loss. But both the moderate and high protein diet resulted in an increase in muscle mass in both groups, but the increase was the same among both groups, indicating that no further benefits were actually gained from increasing protein intake from 1.4 grams to 2.3 grams per kilogram of body weight. Another myth is that protein is only required for building muscle. But muscle mass is not simply a product of protein consumption. Whilst protein plays a key role in muscle protein synthesis, which is the process where muscle proteins are built, focusing on protein without looking at other aspects such as energy and carbohydrate intake may have a limiting effect on muscle building. Protein has a sparing effect, which means that when insufficient amounts of energy or carbohydrates are consumed, protein can be used to provide energy instead. However, this means that its usual functions, such as the maintenance of hair, skin and nails, cell and hormone production, and muscle repair and growth, are restricted. So if you don't regularly consume sufficient amounts of carbohydrates and overall energy, protein cannot be used solely to support muscle protein synthesis. Another common myth is that protein shakes are necessary for muscle gain. We know the importance of protein in our diet, especially for active individuals, but protein powders are not necessarily required. The amount of protein we need is dependent on multiple factors, and for those with higher requirements, it can be more difficult to reach these protein goals, but not impossible. Protein powders may be useful for those who have high protein requirements due to being active or certain illnesses, are vegan or vegetarian because protein shakes often provide a more concentrated source of protein, for those who have a restricted diet or lead a busy lifestyle or travel a lot. Protein shakes are a super convenient way to increase protein in your diet and to help you meet your overall energy needs. Protein shakes are really versatile and don't just need to be drank as a protein shake. You can add the powder to a smoothie or to porridge, which can help bump up the protein content of a meal and ensure that you have enough protein throughout the day. Most protein shakes provide 20 to 30 grams of protein per scoop, which is the recommended amount we should have spread throughout the day. You may have heard that your body can only absorb a certain amount of protein in one sitting, which, whilst is not directly true, there is evidence that spreading out your intake across the day rather than having a large amount of protein in 1 or 2 sittings is better for muscle growth. In one study, individuals consumed 70 grams of protein following a resistance training session, and there was no benefit noted in doing this in comparison with consuming 40 grams. However, there was a reduction in muscle protein breakdown. The International Society of Sports Nutrition recommends that regular doses of 20 to 40 grams of protein every 3 to 4 hours is most beneficial when it comes to muscle protein synthesis in comparison to other dietary patterns. And this has been associated with improved performance outcomes and improved body composition. This brings us onto another popular myth, that too much protein is harmful. For a long time, it was thought that too much protein could cause liver or kidney damage as it places excess strain on those organs in order to process it. But this has never actually been demonstrated in healthy individuals. Those with impaired liver function and kidney disease, or other conditions that can interfere with protein metabolism, may be advised to follow a low protein diet, but you should always consult with your own medical professional if you have any concerns about the impact of your protein intake. A 2020 study concluded that high protein diets do not increase the risk for kidney disease. However, they classified high protein being 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight, which is the middle of the spectrum when it comes to recommendations for active individuals. We know that the recommendations for protein are safe for most people. However, there are aspects of this that can influence health in other ways, such as if your high protein diet limits your carbohydrate intake, you may not be getting enough fiber. Or if you're eating a lot of processed or red meat, it could increase your saturated fat intake and therefore increase your risk of other diseases. Speaking of meat, one of the biggest misconceptions about both vegetarian and vegan diets is that it is difficult to obtain enough protein, especially for those who are active. Protein is made up of amino acids, and different proteins contain different combinations of amino acids. There are 20 amino acids that are needed for bodily functions, but 9 of these are considered essential. Essential amino acids are the amino acids that we cannot make within our body, and so they must be obtained from food. Generally speaking, the protein we get from animal-based sources like meat, fish, eggs, and dairy are considered complete sources of protein, meaning that they contain all 9 of the essential amino acids that our body needs. Whereas plant-based protein sources, such as beans and lentils, are typically missing an essential amino acid or have lower levels of amino acids. However, there are some exceptions. Soy-based protein sources like soy protein isolate, soy milk, or yogurts, and tofu or tempeh contain all 9 essential amino acids. Now, this doesn't mean that unless you don't eat soy, you won't be able to obtain all of the essential amino acids in your diet, because by combining different sources of plant-based protein at a meal, you are likely to be able to compensate for the missing amino acids through other protein sources. These are called complementary proteins. For example, beans are high in lysine but low in methionine, whereas bread is low in lysine and high in methionine, which makes beans on toast a meal that can provide all essential amino acids in comparison to eating beans or bread without another plant protein source. When it comes to muscle repair and growth, the importance of amino acids are emphasized. We know that 20 to 40 grams of protein is required to maximally stimulate muscle protein synthesis, but we also know that a certain amount of leucine, an essential amino acid, is required to stimulate this process. Leucine is typically obtained quite easily through animal protein sources, but it can be trickier to obtain for vegetarians or vegans. For vegetarians, including yogurt, milk, or eggs can be a great source of both protein and leucine in adequate quantities, but for vegans, the amount of leucine in plant protein is often low. This means that a higher quantity of that food, or a combination of different plant proteins, might be needed in order to obtain the required amount of leucine. Some studies highlight that the ingestion of plant-based proteins such as wheat and soy protein results in a lower muscle protein synthetic response in comparison to the ingestion of an equivalent amount of protein derived from an animal source, and not just because some of these are lacking leucine. This lower anabolic effect of plant-based proteins is thought to be attributable to the bioavailability of these protein sources. Bioavailability refers to the amount of a nutrient that we can actually absorb when it is digested. Quite often, plant-based proteins are harder to digest because they contain fiber, but also because they may contain phytates, which can decrease the absorbability of amino acids, calcium, and iron. Richie has a great video explaining this, which you can check out here. The American College of Sports Medicine advises that vegetarian athletes need to eat around 10% more protein than if they were not vegetarian to accommodate for the lower levels of essential amino acids in plant foods, but also due to the bioavailability of amino acids found in these foods. What is interesting to note, though, is that insufficient caloric intake is thought to be more of a limiting factor for muscle growth and repair in vegetarians than lack of protein. Because vegetarian and vegan diets can include a lot of high fiber foods such as vegetables, whole grains, beans, and pulses, impulses, that can mean that you have to eat more of a certain food to attain a certain amount of protein, and therefore it can limit the ability to eat enough calories overall. The reality is that without enough overall energy, the capacity for maintaining and building muscle is limited, and protein is not the only nutrient that is important for building muscle. In the absence of sufficient carbohydrates, protein is used to fulfill the function of carbohydrates, which is to provide energy, as opposed to being used for muscle repair and growth. So, whilst protein is important, overall energy and carbohydrate intake are important to ensure that protein can be used for what it is designed to do. For vegetarians and vegans, more compact sources of carbohydrates and protein may help to meet overall energy, protein, and carbohydrate needs. Whilst fibre is important for a healthy digestive system and for lowering cholesterol and reducing the risk of other health conditions like type 2 diabetes, it can be filling and also inhibit the absorption of certain nutrients. Including more compact and less fibrous carbohydrates may help to reach carb and calorie requirements more easily. Earlier I mentioned that protein supplements can be especially helpful for those who are veggie and vegan, and this is one of the reasons why. They provide a much more compact source of protein, and depending on the type and brand, they usually provide a broad spectrum, if not all, of the essential amino acids. I hope that this video has helped to debunk the common myths about protein, and if there's anything we missed, be sure to pop them in the comments below so we can explore them in future videos. Don't forget to like and subscribe to the Myprotein YouTube channel for more great evidence-based nutrition information.